I had been a shop assistant with no possible chance of any advancement or making a career, so I thought it's about time I did something, because I was also courting a girl and wanted to get married. So I decided I'd better get a real good career going, and I fancied that. And I just joined up. I was accepted. And I'm glad I did, because it was a wonderful job. That morning we had to go to training school. We listened to that 11 o'clock broadcast about going to war, and we were sent to our stations and told right to report back for duty that day. And I was on night duty that first night of the war. For a while there was no bombing, and I was just learning the job and going around and working the beat as we used to do, on our feet, not on cars. And then when the bombing, we had to go and deal with the various incidents, some of them not very nice, dragging people out of houses, reporting on the incidents, and then going back to the station where I lived and just taking life as it came. Well, I was living in single men's quarters in one of the stations, and in industrial, just away from the city centre of Birmingham, and there was also a big railway siding not very far from the station, and obviously they were aiming for that. But the policeman's job is that of protection of life and property, and we were not only dealing with the incidents, I mean, power lines down, gas mains going up. It was not very nice, and we had to do our best to keep life going. That's all any way I can express it now. It wasn't very pleasant, but you had to go, and the people were relying on you, the public were relying on you to do your job and look after them, and that's what we're doing our best to do. You're in some situations that you couldn't avoid, but you had to go and deal with it. There's no other way of putting that. It wasn't very nice dragging bodies out of bomb buildings, looking after the people, and in general they weren't too bad, but you had to calm them, and your presence there seemed to have some effect on them. They relied on you to help them, and that's what we were doing the best we could. You just learn the hard way. We had a few lectures on what to do, but when you come to actually get on with the job in the bombing, you just did what you could do. The job of a policeman is the protection of life and property, and that's what we were doing, and hoping to save a few lives. The people expected you to do your job and help them, and that's what we were doing. You just carried on the best you could, hearing bombs come down and never know when they were going to land. Well, you could hear them coming down, but you didn't know where they were going to land. They always used to say if you heard them, they wouldn't hit you, but if you didn't hear them, you were a goner. We'd had a party, like a farewell party at the Botanical Gardens in Birmingham. I've got a photograph. It's not in the house at the moment. And then I just went down to Bodmin, and it was a bit rough down there, going into army ways after police ways and being chased around by little buggers who we'd have kicked their asses on the beat, but we had to knuckle down for their discipline and change our life altogether. I did 6 weeks there, then I went up to Barnard Castle and joined the Armoured Corps. You were training then to, drive armoured vehicles and that kind of thing, and also learning how to work a radio.
What was the Scout Car Troop?
Well, that was in the 42nd Armoured Division where I went after my training, and it was like a reconnaissance job. I got an officer and who used to go round, I suppose, probing. I never went into action with them, but I just was training with them where was it? Near Wincanton. But I got fed up with that, and then they came. I wasn't very settled. And then the officer came round asking if we could, would we volunteer for special duties for parachuting and doing some parachuting and doing a job and getting out. And that's all we knew, but it was very, very hush-hush. And I went for an interview, and I was accepted. And that's one of the wisest thing I ever did in my life, because I met some absolutely supermen, and they are still friends, those of us that survive. I'm glad I did. Well, we did our training at Henley-on-Thames, our radio training and ground para training, and then we went up to Milton Hall near Peterborough, and that's where we did more training. We went to near Manchester, Tatton Park, and did our drops. We only did 3 because we were not regular paratroops. And that's where we did our drop. Went back and carried on doing our field training at Peterborough. We did 1 training jump just before D-Day, and then we just waited when the second front started, and then gradually our little teams disappeared into various parts of France. Some went into Algeria to go from there into southern France. Well, as we were in a Stirling bomber, I remember that, and a very, very good crew. But I remember as I went out through the bottom, I said to myself, it's too bloody late, you can't go back, get on with the job. And that's what I did, the best I could. And you can't go back now. You're on your way, get on with it. That's the only way I can express that. But when we landed, we went into the local village and stayed one night. The Germans knew we'd arrived, but they didn't know where we were. But we soon disappeared. They gathered with their horses, and next day we had a gas-driven van. They bunged all the explosives and all the drop into it, and we moved from, what was the name of the place? Rivière-les-Fosses, and we went across 2 main roads to near the village of Bouchière, and with a load of explosives in there, if we'd have been caught, I'm afraid we'd have gone up with it. But we weren't. Still here. It's a funny sort of feeling. You're in a strange environment doing a strange job. Well, you took it just as it came. Deal with the situation. Whatever came along, you dealt with it. And I'm still here. Just. On both missions, I had excellent officers. They looked to me to do my job, and they did the leading. And it worked out very, very well. They relied upon me to do my job, and I relied upon them for their leadership. And it worked out very, very well. You didn't fall out, you couldn't. I found out afterwards we had been dropped in by a rookie crew. They were Canadians. And as we ride over the dropping zone, we arranged with them to drop us, come round a little bit later when we got ourselves together, say 20 minutes. We would give them a signal with our torches to drop the rest of the stuff. And then if we could take the remainder of the drop, because it was quite a lot, we'd give them another signal. But we had the one drop which was not We had our wireless equipment, but not the charging equipment. And they went round again and they dropped the stuff. We didn't know, but they dropped it a long, long way away. We had a job to sort it out to get going, because without batteries, without charged batteries, you can't operate your radio. We had to arrange for an emergency drop. And we did eventually get our charging equipment.
How were you able to arrange for that drop, that emergency drop? Because you didn't have any radio equipment.
Oh, I did have the radio, but as soon as the battery ran out of charge, then we were hopeless. But we had this charging equipment, and we got the batteries charged up. From then on, everything went very, very well. But without that radio, that charging equipment, we would have been finished, because there were no other means of communication. And we were about 125 miles behind between the Jap lines. Unarmed combat, silent killing, and general fitness. That was one very, very big thing, because you've got to keep going, and we knew under difficult circumstances. Very happy, because I was doing a job I knew that would be some use to get the Ready War over. The companionship, I say, it still lasts. Well, gradually, we, as the teams wanted to go in, we were called down to London, to Baker Street. You've probably heard of that. We were briefed for our particular mission, taken up to Tempsford, or whatever airfield it was, Tempsford in my case, and from there we went over into France. And I went, of course, to the Haute Marne, near the town of Langres. Well, mine was strictly radio training, but the idea was either prevention of destructive demolitions by the Germans, but also to kill as many of those as we could. But we were working with the Maquis, but I was just based at this farmhouse, and my officer didn't like radio training, so made me stay with me radio.
Can you explain what the Maquis are?
Well, there were French people from all over. There were farm workers, even people from the city. I made a very good friend who was a local teacher. But it's either a case of the Germans rounding them up and sending them to Germany, or they disappeared to be like these local fighting bands.
So when you arrived, who were your team? What did you have to do next?
Well, I set up the radio set, and the first thing was to get in touch with England and establish contact. We had our proper schedules and our radio plan to work to, and it worked very, very well. It was all done in cipher, no plain language. It was quite good, working with the local people and getting to know them. There's Captain Oswin Craster and the French Lieutenant Carlier. Well, that was not his proper name, but that was the name under which we knew him. It was a nom de plume. All the Frenchmen in the unit had nom de plumes, I suppose you'd call it. They had relations in France, and they didn't want to go back to the family, and the Germans would take it out of them. They were quite ruthless. Very, very nice. The Maquis distressed them a bit, because although they were French, they spoke with a very, very heavy German accent, having lived near the German border. But I got on with them very, very well. They were very hospitable, and I still go and, although the mother and father are dead now, I still go to see Joseph, who helped me with my radio set, and his wife, who still live in the area. In fact, I've been back to the original farmhouse many times. Targets for the RAF, for one thing, and the other thing, getting our supplies in. But it's general information that we could send back, And of course we received instructions the other way as to what to do. And we did with some success too, because on one occasion the French people came in and said, there's a big German convoy in a village, Bussière. Our officers went to see what it was. They came back, and I got onto the radio set on our emergency channel, and within a few hours some American Thunderbolts came over and they shot the convoy up, killed about 100 German troops. I was watching it, very, very happy. We'd gone in to do a job, and that's what we were doing it. And the satisfaction that we were doing it and doing it well made you feel a lot better. We got shot up a couple of times, but they missed me.
Who by?
Well, there was a German, there was French Citroëns taken over by the Germans, and they'd got machine guns mounted on the top as they came along the road by the farm, so they shot at us. And I got out of the way pretty quickly. Because those MG-34s, there were 960 rounds a minute coming in your direction, and there were two of them. So I got round the corner of the building rather quickly, but they didn't hang about. The Maquis were firing back and they disappeared. There were some casualties amongst the Maquis, but not many, fortunately. Well, when the first French army came up from the south, we'd had a reconnaissance party come up and give them all the local information that we could as to where the enemy, the Germans, were. And then as the army came up, they overran our position. So we were finished, and we'd made our way back to London, managed to scrounge a lift back to Paris, and got had a couple of days in Paris, which was very, very nice. And then we flew back to England and got on our embarkation leave and asked if we would like to do the same job in Southeast Asia. And 100% of us said yes. Went on leave, and then embarkation leave, and on the Otranto and out to Bombay, and on the route to Ceylon, where our new camp was, our new training centre.
What did you have to do there?
Get acclimatised to weather, because the climate was so much different. It was so hot and humid after the European climate. But all the insects and bugs. Fortunately, no snakes on our part of the camp. But there were on the officer's side, there were quite a lot of snakes in a big paddy field. And I'm terrified of snakes. I should have had 3 months jungle training, but I was a spare operator, as Aussie Craster hadn't come out at that stage. So I was teamed up with two other officers, and they wanted a team urgently in a particular part of Burma. So I just said, right, you're in. So we teamed up and we went up to, flown up to Calcutta, did no training at all, just found out the hard way. And we parachuted in at 11 o'clock at night. We learned as we went along. But our mission was very successful. It was hard work, very, very hard work, because wherever you went, there were no such things as roads, just tracks. And whatever you had was on your back. 60, 70 pounds on your back. Oh yeah. You didn't carry what you didn't need. Now I've got big feet, size 12s, and the army boots are rather heavy, so I buried my spare pair rather quickly because I'd got to carry them. I'd got some American jungle boots, which I was wearing, but I'd only got the one pair because of my big feet. So they had to last me. But it was hard going. There's no doubt about that. But I enjoyed it. I was with 2 excellent officers and 3 local lads. And we, as you can see, we didn't do too badly. Getting information in and giving targets to the RAF. And we were supplied by air once a month. We were told that we needed targets and getting information out where the Japanese were, what they were doing, and that kind of thing, so that the RAF, they did the dirty work, but we had to get the information as to where they were and what they were doing. But one of the worst things was we had to be very, very careful. When British planes came over, there were hurricanes coming over at bamboo level, and anything moved, they fired at. So if we heard them coming, we just went to ground quickly. They knew we were in the area, but they didn't know where we were. That's just one of the hard things of it. Well, our original dropping ground, there was supposed to have been a party come from another group that had gone in to provide us a landing ground, or a dropping zone, I should say. But they didn't, there was no sign of them when we got over the site. So we decided to go in blind. We didn't want to go back to Calcutta. So we went in blind. That was, I mean, I say blind, you go in without a reception committee down the other end. And we landed in this paddy field with all our goods coming down after us. It was bloody hard going. We made contact with the local headman, and he, we didn't know whether we could trust him or not. He showed us a safe spot. We moved from there and just kept down in the jungle, just rolled ourselves in our parachutes and went to sleep. We were so tired. About 3 o'clock in the morning. You didn't have to be scared. He'd never do anything if you did. You were all very apprehensive, but you never thought about it. You just got on with the job. Well, my Major Kemmel, he'd been out there for a while, and Chris Blathwaite, who had been in France, and I knew, he was the second in command. That was the team, plus 3 Arakanese, Yeong, Ongzo and Barsaw. And we got on with them very well. They were the interpreters, and, you know, we just got... They didn't like the Japanese because they're always pinching their rice. So they saw that we were nice and safe and we were helping them. And they took us from place to place. We didn't stay long in one place. We dare not, because the Japanese knew we were there, but they didn't know where we were. And we used to move at least every 2 days. Well, first of all, the RAF made a bit of a mess of the drop, and we lost a lot of our kit. We were living on RAF emergency rations, and then we were living with the locals and eating their local food until we got another drop in. We were living on K rations for 1 month, American K rations, then Australian jungle rations for another month, and then we had the ordinary English rations dropped to us. But we also lived off the land as well with the local, very, very good rice. And the locals were very, very good cooks. I couldn't cook rice to save me life. Spare time? You're joking. I got a radio set to maintain and batteries to charge. And that, apart from looking after myself, that was what my main occupation was. And also helping with the enciphering and deciphering of all the traffic that we had. I was on the air twice a day back to Calcutta.
And what sort of messages did you send? Yeah.
Well, it depended. They wanted our headquarters wanted to know as much about the Japanese positions and strengths and that kind of thing. And that's the sort of thing we were doing. That, and we got some very good targets for the RAF, and they used to come over, and and there was a Japanese convoy on a road that the Japs had constructed. We learned about it, and I got on the emergency schedule back to Calcutta, and first thing next morning, some bombers came over there and obliterated the convoy, as we found out. When I never actually saw the scene, but our locals said that they'd really made a mess of this Japanese convoy. You wanted to carry on living. You were there to do a job and you just got on with it. The bombing in Birmingham. That was pretty horrifying. There's no doubt about that. Being on the beat and looking after the general public and dealing with incidents, that was the worst part. The only other time I think I was really scared is when those German came through and firing at us. But the worst part was the bombing. This is very funny, or it wasn't at the time. I was in Pune and left. I was still in Force 136, and I'd had an inoculation for bubonic plague, which laid me low, and the effect on me was terrible, and everybody else was on the booze. This was May the 8th, 1944, when the war in Europe finished, and everybody in the camp was enjoying themselves. And I was curled up under my mosquito net. In a terrible state I was that night. I just wanted to get unconscious. Oh, terrible. But the VJ, I was in hospital there with, when they dropped the bombs. I'd left Force 136 then, and I was up in hospital up in northern India with dysentery. Well, India is not the healthiest of place, and it didn't like me very much. And dysentery and malaria lowered my health quite a lot, and I went down from a healthy 14.5 stone to 11 stone in under 2 years. Not a very healthy climate. It certainly broadened my outlook on life, and I saw a lot of things I never otherwise would have seen. And I think it altered my character altogether. It's a bit difficult to explain on that one. It's not, wartime are not the nicest of things, but it does bring the worst and the best out of you. But it wasn't too bad. I had to go through it. I had no option. So I got on with it.